Okay, Blue Boy, I must know, what's your name?
Me? My name is Mega Man.
Mega Man Legends. It was an interesting way to bring Mega Man in a completely different direction. Not only did it bring the Blue Bomber kicking and screaming, well, I guess that's debatable, into 3D, but it also took a primarily 2D platforming game and turned it into a 3D adventure, with mixed results. The story itself follows a brand new Mega Man in a world pretty much completely covered in ocean, and his job is to explore precursor ruins filled with robots to collect treasure. However, on one such adventure, his flying ship ends up breaking and he crashes on a populated island. Now he has to go explore the ruins on this island. Oh, and there's pirates to go fight too. And that's literally the plot. Like, you might think I'm just abbreviating this for the sake of fitting it all into this review, but no. That is literally the entire plot. And I'm gonna harp on this for a little while, but here's the deal. Once you actually land on the island, outside of the tutorial, the structure of the game is literally, there are pirates doing something, go stop them, oh hey look, there's ruins you haven't explored, go explore them, then rinse, repeat, until you beat the game. I'm not joking. That is literally how this game is structured. It feels like the people who made this game didn't understand that they were actually making a proper adventure game, as opposed to an arcadey platformer. Because in an arcade-style game, story isn't the biggest focus, it's about gameplay. However, in an adventure, story is majorly important. It's those little breadcrumbs of advancing plot and intrigue that allow you to take that extra step towards the ending. Like, ooh, I want to know what that is, so let's go figure out what that is and why that happened. Whereas in this game, it's literally, ooh look, there's pirates, hey there's a ruin. Rinse, repeat. In fact, I think they kind of realize this near the end of the game because, and I'm not joking here, they decide to add a bunch of plot in like the last 10 minutes of the game. Going so far as to completely ditching the pirates and making them sort of a minor nuisance, and instead favoring this whole new boss character that literally gets introduced one hallway between where you meet him and where you fight him. And then the game ends. And what's frustrating about this is not only are the characters of the pirates sort of established as the main antagonists at this point because you've run into them so many times, but there's also a dynamic between your characters that you already have established. Whereas this whole new character just sort of shows up and you're just supposed to go fight him because he's kind of a jerk. But fine, okay. You want to keep the final boss a secret because you want to tie him into the mystique of the ruins. Okay, fine, I can accept that, except all the exposition this final boss guy dumps on you, well it feels like it's trying to be a giant, like, plot twist or something. I don't think the people who made this game understand what a plot twist is, because a plot twist should not be a completely obvious thing. I mean, near as I can tell, the entire plot twist was, the people who made these ruins don't like people. Which I figured out during the tutorial when all the robots in the ruins were shooting at me. And perhaps what's even more of a slap in the face in terms of story is, in the second last cutscene, this giant Deus Ex Machina shows up that literally says, I know everything about you, I know everything about this world, I know everything about this ruins. I'm not gonna tell ya, but I know it. And then the game ends. Oh wait, except for that one other thing at the end of the game that I hated even more about the story, where Mega Man and Roll reminisce about how this was a giant side adventure that had nothing to do with anything and absolutely nothing got accomplished. I mean, thanks for acknowledging what I figured out a long time ago, game, but if you're really willing to wear that as a badge of honor, you might want to fix that, because, I mean, really pointing out the fact that your story absolutely accomplished nothing and touched on nothing and has really nothing to do with anything isn't something to be proud of. Maybe I'm weird to think that, but come on. For the most part, the gameplay itself does try to make up for the complete absence of a story, and for the most part it works fairly well. Now, I can't really get into gameplay before I talk about the controls, which is unfortunately the only thing about gameplay I really don't like. And what bothers me even more about this is the only reason I don't like it is from the era which it came. This game was made before the analog stick was implemented on the PS1, so this game controls entirely digitally. Trying to control a character in a 3D environment with 2D control implementation will always mean that you're going to lack precision, which means in close scrapes you're more often than not actually going to get hit rather than avoiding your opponent. And that can be kind of annoying. Because of the somewhat chunky control scheme, Aiming in this game is a little bit awkward too. The developers did try to get around this by employing a ridiculous amount of auto-aim, as well as a lock-on system. However, it does not feature a manual aim system. You can sort of trick the game into a manual aim by employing the lock-on system from a range too far to actually auto-lock onto an enemy. However, more often than not, if you're too far away to actually lock onto an enemy, you're probably too far away to actually hit them. Another problem with the auto lock-on system is it tends to automatically detect the nearest enemy, which sounds good on paper, but when you're trying to take out one specific opponent, which might not necessarily be the thing closest to you, well, you're not going to hit them, which is a bit problematic. That said, after 20 minutes or so you do pick up on the controls, and it does work quite well. The actual adventuring is quite interesting. The island of Catalox is covered in little ruins as well as more major ruins, including the very large main gate. Now the main story progresses through unlocking the sub-gates, and then later the main gate, but there are also smaller nameless ruins all around the island. What's really interesting though is these smaller ruins that are all over the island are actually interconnected, and this feels like it could have been implemented with like a giant puzzle involving all the other ruins, or a greater backstory about the island that just wasn't told, which is a little frustrating. Once everything clicks that everything's interconnected with each other, it makes the world feel more realistic, that everything's interconnected and alive, and that's really cool. Running around fighting pirates and the various Reaver bots in the underground is very satisfying, very fun, and like all Mega Man games before it, this game utilizes a weapon system, where you've got more than just your Buster Gun. You've got tons of different weapons that, for the most part, you have to find and develop before you get them, but they have a varying degree of usefulness. For example, the drill is basically completely useless outside of actually digging up walls. And the shining laser, which when utilized you must yell shining finger, it's a rule, can basically cut the final boss into Swiss cheese in a matter of seconds, because shining laser. Upgrading and finding all these different bits of equipment is a ton of fun, although some of them do require you to go through numerous subquests which take a lot of time. But in the end, it's totally worth it. But that's not all in terms of weapons. This game also utilizes a modular equipment system for your Buster Gun. Essentially, your Buster Gun starts out with very weak stats. You can install different add-ons into your Buster and effectively change how much damage it does or how far the bullets shoot. And by the end, it helps to tailor-make your own custom unique experience, just based on your preference for fighting with your Buster. And that's absolutely fantastic. The last mechanic of the game I'd like to touch on is the karma system, because this game has one, although it feels largely not utilized. Essentially, doing good deeds raises your karma level, which makes your armor a lighter tone. Doing evil deeds, such as recycling, for whatever reason, will make your armor much darker, and then people say bad things about you. But aside from that, nothing happens. Like, literally that's it. All it does is change people's perspective on you if you go and knock on random people's doors. It feels like this mechanic was added either last minute or very, very early and no one bothered to utilize it or remove it. Which is a bit of a shame, because it does feel like there might have been a greater use for this, like expanding the subquests depending on your overall karmic balance or something. Would have been neat, but it's not here, unfortunately. The runes themselves are fairly straightforward and easy to understand. Weirdly enough, there's only one that really utilizes a greater understanding of your equipment for the sake of puzzle solving. In fact, there really isn't much of puzzle solving at all. It's usually just find X number of keys, get the treasure, leave. And very rarely you might fight a boss. The overall presentation of this game is kind of a mixed bag. Visually, the game looks okay. The character models, for the most part, look great. I think Mega Man's hair is a little bit too big, but aside from that, I think all the characters have a sufficient amount of personality and interest with how they look. And the main ruins of the game all have their own unique aesthetic. That said, the smaller ruins to the game all blend together using the exact same tile set, which does get kind of bland really, really quickly. The various pirate machines and Reaver bots are all very interesting looking. I wish there was a few more types, but I do like the Reaver bots because they look sort of half feral, half mechanical. Like, am I fighting monsters in giant robotic armor, or am I fighting robots that just look like beasts? I don't know, but I really, really like their design. Especially the really big dog robots. Something about them, man. They're just cool. Contrary to the visual design, the audio design is kind of lackluster. On the bright side, Mega Man finally sounds like he is played by a boy. and that makes sense because he is played by a boy, so way to go there. The rest of the voice acting seems to work relatively well, although I think the lines themselves and the voice direction could have used a lot more work. The voice acting itself worked decently enough. The soundtrack is kind of all over the place with this one. The smaller ruins have the same drowning, dull, echoey sound, which is really creepy. I mean, so much so when I was a kid I had to play with the game on mute just so I wouldn't get too scared. Once you get above ground, most of the soundtrack is, weirdly enough, classical pieces, which kind of feel a bit out of place, and I'm 80% certain that the main town theme is public domain. In fact, by the end of it, there was only 2 songs I found wildly memorable, and that is the theme to The Pirates, which is a very catchy tune, but the only remarkable song on the soundtrack that's played during gameplay is the main gate theme, hence why it's playing right now. And I feel like I need to point this out, but every time Mega Man takes a step, he makes this weird squishing sound. And once you notice that, it will drive you up the wall. And once you notice it, you can't unnotice it, so I've basically just ruined the game for you. So, wahaha, and all that. Overall, Mega Man Legends is a decent adventure, barring the non-existent story. The gameplay itself is relatively fun, and exploring the ruins is a satisfying experience. Do I recommend picking up Mega Man Legends? Well, I want to say yes, but I also know that Mega Man Legends games, like all 3 of them, are really expensive. If you can get this game, I would suggest Mega Man 64 on the N64. I know it took a hit in terms of overall audio, because it had to compress it for a cartridge format instead of a disc format, but the reason is this, and this is something you probably won't hear too much about N64 games, but controls. Because, like every other N64 game, with the exception of Mischief Makers, it uses the C-stick, which means you're going to get a little bit more precision out of controlling your character. If you don't mind digital, you can pick it up on PSN as well for about $10, along with the other 2 games in the series. And I think it is an enjoyable experience, you know, provided you weren't actually expecting a story-based adventure, which is like most adventures, but still, it's a fun Mega Man 3D thing, and that's a thing.